The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor the moment my mother grabbed my wrist and hissed, "Get in the kitchen where you belong. We can't have you ruining Marcus's perfect day." 300 guests turned to stare, but not one of them knew I owned the venue. The Whitmore Estates grand ballroom sparkled like a jewelry box that Saturday evening, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across the white-draped tables. The air hung thick with the scent of white roses and money, that particular perfume of privilege I'd grown up choking on. My silk dress, a modest navy blue I'd chosen specifically to blend into the background, now clung to my skin with the cold sweat of humiliation. "Sarah's just helping out today," my mother Eleanor announced to the cluster of confused guests, her practiced smile never wavering. "You know how she is, always trying to be useful somehow." The dismissive wave of her manicured hand might as well have been a slap. Victoria, my brother's bride, laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "At least she's finally useful for something." She adjusted her cathedral-length veil, the diamonds in her tiara catching the light. "Marcus, darling, isn't it sweet? Your sister actually showed up to work your wedding." My brother stood there in his custom Armani tuxedo, the one I'd anonymously paid for through a wedding gift from a business associate. He didn't defend me. He never did. Instead, he shrugged with that practiced nonchalance I remembered from childhood, when he'd break my toys and convince our parents I'd done it myself. "Just don't mess anything up, Sarah," he said, straightening his platinum cufflinks. "This day needs to be perfect." My hand moved unconsciously to my clutch, fingers finding the outline of grandfather's pocket watch through the beaded fabric. Its steady weight grounded me as the catering manager, an employee of mine, though she didn't know it, approached with an apron. "Mrs. Chen requested you put this on," she said apologetically, holding out the white polyester like a flag of surrender. "Over your dress." 300 pairs of eyes watched as I tied that apron over my $3,000 dress, the one extravagance I'd allowed myself, hoping maybe today would be different. The whispers started immediately, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Isn't that the sister who failed at business? I heard she lives in a studio apartment. Marcus really did get all the talent in that family." I picked up a tray of champagne flutes, the crystal singing against my trembling fingers. Each glass was worth more than what my family thought I made in a week. The irony wasn't lost on me as I began serving drinks to my brother's investment banking colleagues, men who would kill for a meeting with the CEO of Neural Net Technologies. They looked through me like I was furniture. "Champagne?" I offered to Judge Harrison, who'd presided over my parents' recent business lawsuit, the one I'd secretly settled. He took a glass without acknowledgement, turning back to his conversation about the mysterious Wellington Foundation that had saved the Chen family business. "Remarkable philanthropy," he mused, though I wonder what they saw in Richard's failing firm. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible and essential simultaneously. My feet ached in designer heels no one bothered to notice. The kitchen doors swung open and closed, revealing glimpses of organized chaos. My kitchen in my venue. "Sarah," my mother's voice cut through the classical quartet. "The Worthington table needs attention, now." The Worthingtons. Old money, older grudges. Mrs. Worthington had once told me I was pretty enough to marry well if I stopped trying to be clever. I approached their table with fresh champagne, my smile practiced and hollow. "Eleanor must be so proud," Mrs. Worthington stage whispered to her daughter. "One successful child out of 2 isn't bad." The champagne trembled in my grip. One drop of Dom Perignon fell onto the white tablecloth, blooming like a bloodstain. "Careful," Mrs. Worthington's daughter smirked. "That's worth more than you make in a day." If only she knew I'd bought the vineyard it came from last year. As I retreated to the kitchen, my phone buzzed against my hip. A message from James, my CFO. "All pieces in position, awaiting your signal." I stood in the doorway between 2 worlds, the gleaming ballroom where my family celebrated erasing me, and the kitchen where they'd shoved me. My reflection caught in the stainless steel of the warming ovens. A woman in an apron worth $50 million, serving champagne to people living off her anonymous charity. As I tied that apron tighter, I made a decision that would change everything, but first I had to play my part perfectly. The kitchen's industrial refrigerator hummed against my back as I took a moment to breathe, letting the cold seep through my dress. How had it come to this? How had I become the ghost at my own brother's wedding? 15 years ago, I'd been the Chen family's rising star. Fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree, I'd launched my first startup in our garage. My parents had tolerated it the way they'd tolerated my childhood science experiments, with bemused disinterest and occasional irritation when I stayed up coding too late. "Sarah's playing with computers again," my mother would tell her garden club friends, the same tone she'd use to describe a child's finger painting phase. Marcus was at Harvard Business School then, the golden boy following the acceptable path. When he came home for winter break, he found me surrounded by whiteboards covered in algorithms and business plans. I was too excited, too trusting when he showed interest. "This is brilliant," he'd said, studying my neural network designs. "Mind if I use some of these concepts for my thesis?" Some concepts. He'd submitted my entire business model as his capstone project, winning the Exeter Prize and launching his career at Goldman Sachs. When I confronted him, he laughed. "You should be flattered. Besides, it's not like you were going to do anything real with it." 6 months later, my startup failed. At least, that's what I told my family. The truth was, I'd sold it quietly to a tech giant for $2 million. It was my first taste of invisibility, and it was intoxicating. No more condescending comments at family dinners. No more being trotted out as the clever daughter at parties like a performing seal. I built my next company under a pseudonym, then another and another. The kitchen door swung open, jerking me back to the present. A server rushed past with a tray of canapes, each one a tiny architectural marvel I'd personally selected from the catering menu weeks ago when I'd anonymously suggested the venue to Victoria. My phone screen lit up with financial notifications I quickly dismissed. The Wellington Foundation, my foundation, had just completed another transfer to my father's struggling import business. This month's $1 million infusion would keep him from bankruptcy, and he'd never know it came from the daughter he'd written off as a disappointment. "You should have studied something practical," he'd told me at my graduation, like Marcus, who'd built his entire portfolio on my ideas. Marcus, who now stood in the ballroom accepting congratulations for his brilliant market predictions based on reports I'd been feeding him through anonymous emails for years, unable to fully let go of the brother I'd once idolized. the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7. Grandfather. He'd been the only one who'd seen me clearly. On his deathbed 5 years ago, he'd waited until we were alone to pull me close. The watch, he'd whispered, pressing the antique timepiece into my palm. It was always meant for you. You understand time, Sarah. You understand that patience is power. Of course, when his will was read, the family claimed Marcus should have inherited it. Sarah doesn't appreciate nice things, my mother had explained to the lawyer. She'd probably just sell it. I'd kept it anyway, hidden like everything else valuable about me. Through the kitchen's porthole window, I watched my family hold court. My mother, resplendent in champagne silk, telling the story of Marcus's first million. My father, chest puffed with borrowed pride, discussing deals he could only make because of my shadow funding. And Marcus himself, surrounded by admirers, the successful son who'd saved the family name. They had no idea their savior was serving them shrimp cocktail. The Wellington Foundation had been my masterpiece of anonymous revenge, if you could call it revenge to save people who'd discarded you. 5 years of million-dollar donations, bailouts disguised as investments, problems mysteriously solved before they could destroy the Chen family reputation. I'd preserved them like insects in amber, keeping them frozen in their delusions while I built an empire they couldn't imagine. Sarah, the catering manager, appeared, looking harried. Table 12 needs water, and your mother wants you to clear the cocktail hour plates. Table 12. The Andersons. Mr. Anderson had once interviewed me for an internship at his firm and told me I didn't have the killer instinct for business. Last month, I'd bought his company through a hostile takeover. He didn't know his new boss was refreshing his water glass. As I moved through the ballroom, invisible in my apron, I caught fragments of conversation. The Wellington Foundation is sending a representative tonight. I heard they're considering a major investment in Marcus's firm. Richard must have some connection we don't know about. They were all wrong. The Wellington Foundation was already here, wearing a catering apron and a practiced smile. Their benefactor had been serving them champagne all evening, and they'd never bothered to look her in the eye. My phone buzzed again. The lawyer. Documents ready for signature. Phase 1 complete. I glanced at the head table where my family laughed and toasted their good fortune. They had no idea their family benefactor was serving them champagne. The kitchen erupted into controlled chaos as the main course service began. I dodged servers balancing plates of seared duck breast, Marcus's favorite, which I'd suggested to the venue months ago through a shell email account. My hands moved automatically, loading plates onto trays, but my mind was elsewhere. You missed a spot. Victoria's voice sliced through the kitchen noise like a blade. She stood in the doorway, her wedding dress bustling around her like meringue, pointing at a small champagne spill on the marble floor. Clean it up. We can't have the real guests seeing messes. Real guests. The distinction hung in the air between us. I knelt with a service towel, my knees touching the cold floor. As I wiped, I heard Marcus's voice drifting from the ballroom, amplified by the sound system. The neural network approach to market prediction I pioneered at Goldman has revolutionized our trading strategies, he was telling a group of investors. It's all about pattern recognition and adaptive algorithms. My algorithms, my code, my revolutionary approach that he'd stolen 15 years ago and had been dining out on ever since. Fascinating, one investor replied. Would you consider licensing the technology? I'm in talks with several firms, Marcus continued. The applications are endless. I stood slowly, the wet towel clenched in my fist. Victoria was still watching me, her ice blue eyes calculating something. Marcus tells me you work in customer service now, she said, tilting her head. Must be quite a change from your, what was it, failed tech thing? Something like that, I murmured, moving past her toward the service elevator. That's when I saw him. James Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, standing by the champagne fountain with a camera. Not just any James Chen, but the senior photographer for TechCrunch who'd covered my first company's acquisition, one of the few people who knew what I really looked like. Our eyes met across the kitchen. His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, recognition, shock. Sarah Chen? His voice carried despite the noise. The Sarah Chen who built NeuralNet? Several servers turned to stare. Victoria's attention snapped toward us like a whip. I'm sorry, I said quickly, affecting confusion. You must have me confused with someone else. I'm just helping with catering. James stepped closer, his press credentials swinging from his lanyard. No, I'm sure it's you. I photographed you 5 years ago for the Bitcoin acquisition. You sold for... You're mistaken, I interrupted, my heart hammering against my ribs. I've never been involved in tech. Excuse me, I have tables to serve. But James was pulling out his phone, scrolling through old photos. Look, this is you, isn't it, at the Moscone Center? The photo on his screen showed a younger me in a power suit, shaking hands with the CEO of Bitcoin. The woman in that photo looked confident, successful, everything the woman in the apron wasn't supposed to be. Victoria snatched the phone before I could react. Her eyes darted between the screen and my face, her wedding manicure glittering as she gripped the device. Interesting, she said slowly. Very interesting. It's a coincidence, I said, taking the phone and handing it back to James. Lots of Asian women in tech look similar. Happens all the time. James seemed unconvinced but confused. The resemblance is uncanny, and your name is unfortunately common, I finished. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I escaped to the wine cellar, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. The text I sent to my attorney was brief. Execute Phase 1 now. Within seconds, confirmation popped up. The shell company I'd created had just initiated the purchase of the mortgage company that held Marcus's firm's loans. By the time he gave his toast, I'd owned 30% of his business without him knowing it. I climbed back to the kitchen where Victoria was waiting, her arms crossed over her designer bodice. I know you're hiding something, she said quietly. That photographer recognized you. People make mistakes, I replied, picking up another tray. Not that kind of mistake. She stepped closer, her perfume, Jo Malone, if I wasn't mistaken, overwhelming in its intensity. Marcus always said you were clever, too clever. Maybe he was right. If I were that clever, I said, meeting her gaze steadily, would I be serving champagne at my brother's wedding? She considered this, her lips pursing. Unless that's exactly what you want us to think? The wedding coordinator's voice crackled over the service intercom. Toast in T-minus 60 minutes. All hands prepare for champagne service. Victoria smiled, cold and sharp. I'll be watching you, sister-in-law, very closely. As she swept back to the ballroom, my phone buzzed with another confirmation. Phase 1 complete. The mortgage company was mine. Marcus's biggest creditor was now his invisible sister. I looked at the champagne flutes lined up like soldiers on the service counter, each one waiting to be filled for my brother's toast. Within an hour, my brother would give a toast that would trigger everything. He just didn't know it yet. The wine cellar was supposed to be my sanctuary, a moment of quiet before the storm. I'd discovered it during my venue walkthrough months ago, a forgotten corner behind racks of vintages worth more than most people's houses. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was hiding among bottles I could buy by the case, while my family thought I couldn't afford a glass. Oh, sweetheart, I spun around to find Aunt Helen standing in the doorway, her silver hair catching the amber cellar lights. Of all the people to find me here, it had to be her, the only family member who'd ever looked at me with something other than disappointment or dismissal. "You don't have to hide from me," she said softly, closing the door behind her. Her emerald dress rustled as she navigated between the wine racks. "I saw you run down here." Victoria looked rather pleased with herself. I wiped my eyes quickly, realizing I'd been crying without noticing. The stress was cracking my carefully constructed facade. "I'm fine," I lied, straightening my apron. "Just needed a moment." Helen studied me with those sharp hazel eyes that had always seen too much. "You know, I've been wondering something for years," she said, settling onto a wooden crate with surprising grace. "How does a failed entrepreneur afford to send me anonymous donations every Christmas?" My blood froze. "I don't know what you— $50,000 every December 24th for the past 5 years, she continued, examining a dusty Bordeaux bottle. "Always from different accounts, but always the same amount, always with the same note. For the animals." Only 3 people knew I called my shelter the Animals instead of its proper name. She set the bottle down and looked at me directly. "Grandfather, who's dead, Marcus, who wouldn't donate water if I was on fire, and you." The silence stretched between us like a held breath. I could deny it, spin another lie, add another layer to my elaborate deception. But looking at Helen, the aunt who'd snuck me books on coding when my parents insisted I study literature, who'd attended my MIT graduation when everyone else was at Marcus's Harvard ceremony, I felt the weight of my secrets crushing my chest. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I whispered. "Try me." I almost did. The words gathered in my throat like water behind a dam. The truth about neural net, about Bitcoin, about the 47 other companies I'd built and sold, about the Wellington Foundation, about the empire I'd constructed in shadow while playing the family failure in light. My phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Marcus's mortgage company. Acquisition had triggered automatic alerts in his financial systems. He'd know something was happening within minutes. "I have to go," I said, moving toward the door. Helen caught my wrist gently. "Sarah, whatever you're planning, and don't insult me by pretending you're not planning something, be careful. Your mother and Marcus, they're not as oblivious as you think." Before I could respond, the cellar door burst open. Marcus stood there, his bow tie askew, champagne staining his white shirt. "There you are," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Mom's looking for you. Apparently the photographer was asking questions about you. Something about tech companies?" His eyes narrowed as he noticed Helen. "Aunt Helen, surprised you're not with your rescue mutts. Surprised you can stand upright after that 5th whiskey," Helen shot back. Marcus ignored her, focusing on me. You know, it's funny. I gave a toast earlier about family disappointments who couldn't achieve, about people who aim high and fall flat. Everyone knew I was talking about you. The words were meant to wound, and 5 years ago they would have. Now they just felt tired, like a song played too many times. Your toast was lovely, I said flatly. Was it? He stepped closer, and I could smell the alcohol mixing with his Tom Ford cologne. Because someone just bought out Harrington Financial, the company that holds my firm's debt, bought it in one clean sweep, cash deal. My expression remained neutral. That's interesting. Interesting? His laugh was harsh. It's suspicious as hell. The same day as my wedding, and get this, the buyer used a shell company called Tempest Holdings. Tempest. Time. I'd named it after grandfather's watch. Maybe it's a coincidence, Helen suggested, though her eyes were on me. There are no coincidences in finance, Marcus snapped. Then to me, you wouldn't know anything about this, would you? You don't even have a bank account worth mentioning. Victoria's voice echoed down the cellar stairs. Marcus, the father-daughter dance is starting. He straightened his jacket, the momentary vulnerability replaced by his usual arrogance. Clean yourself up, he told me. You look pathetic. And those shoes. He glanced at my feet and paused. I'd made a mistake. The Louboutin heels, their red soles distinctive even in the cellar's dim light, didn't match my story. Those are $1,200 shoes, he said slowly. Outlet, I said quickly. 90% off. You know I'm good at finding bargains. He stared at me for a long moment, calculation flickering behind his drunk eyes. Then Victoria called again, more insistent, and he turned away. We're not done talking about this, he warned before disappearing up the stairs. Helen stood, smoothing her dress. Those aren't outlet shoes, she said simply. No, I admitted, they're not. She moved toward the door, then paused. Your time will come, she said, and my heart stopped. Those were grandfather's exact words. When it does, make sure it's worth the wait. As she left, my phone screen lit up with alerts. Victoria had posted a photo on Instagram, me in my apron serving champagne, with the caption, "Even family helps out on the big day. Blessed Nubker's servant heart." The comments were already pouring in, each one a small humiliation, but I noticed something else. In the background of her photo, barely visible, was the briefcase my attorney had delivered, the one with the ownership documents. Victoria's eyes narrowed in the photo. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for. The grandfather clock in the main hallway struck 8, its deep bronze tone reverberating through my bones. I stood frozen in the service corridor, one hand pressed against the wallpaper. Blue damask, the same pattern from my childhood home. The sound transported me back 15 years to another clock, another moment that changed everything. Grandfather's bedroom had smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, even with the medical equipment crowding the space. I'd driven straight from my failed pitch meeting, the one where investors laughed me out of the room, calling my neural network concept cute but impractical. My eyes were still swollen from crying when I sat beside his bed. "Let me see it," he'd whispered, his voice paper-thin but insistent. I'd pulled out my laptop, showing him the code I'd written, the algorithms that would eventually revolutionize predictive modeling. His eyes, clouded with pain medication, had suddenly sharpened. "This is brilliant," he'd said, the same words Marcus would steal 3 months later. But from grandfather, they'd been genuine. "You're going to change the world, Sarah. The investors don't think so. Mom and Dad don't think so." His weathered hand had found mine. "Your parents see gold in brass, but miss the diamond in coal. They always have." He'd reached under his pillow, pulling out the pocket watch, a 1923 Vacheron Constantin, worth more than my parents' house. "This was my father's from Shanghai. He built an empire from nothing, then lost it all and built it again. Time, Sarah, time reveals all truth." "Dad says Marcus should have this," I'd protested. "He's the eldest son." "Your father says many foolish things." Grandfather had pressed the watch into my palm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Look at the inscription." I'd opened it carefully. In Chinese characters, then English below, "True worth is proven in time." "I had that added for you," he'd said, "because you understand what they don't, that patience is the longest con, and the most effective revenge is success they never see coming." He'd died 2 days later. At the will reading, when the watch wasn't mentioned, my parents assumed he'd forgotten about it. Marcus had made a joke about grandfather's declining mental state. I'd sat there with the watch in my pocket, its weight a secret anchor. Now, standing in the service corridor of my own venue, I pulled the watch from my clutch. The gold caught the light, warm and reassuring. I wound it carefully, 3 turns like grandfather had taught me. The soft ticking synchronized with my heartbeat. "Sarah," my mother's voice shattered the memory. "The Wellington Foundation representative is here." I almost laughed. If only she knew she was summoning the foundation's CEO to serve canapés to herself. I made my way to the kitchen where chaos had reached its peak. The representative, actually my CFO, David, in a Tom Ford suit I'd selected specifically to impress my status-obsessed family, stood near the pass, playing his role perfectly. "The foundation is very interested in your son's firm," David was telling my father, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We believe in investing in family businesses with strong values." My father puffed up like a peacock. "Marcus has always been exceptional, top of his class at Harvard, youngest VP at Goldman." "Yes, we're aware of his achievements," David said, his pause so subtle only I caught it. "We're particularly interested in his neural network trading algorithm." My algorithm, the one Marcus had claimed as his own for 15 years. The one that had made him rich while I served champagne at his wedding. I passed behind them with a tray, close enough to hear my mother gushing. "We've always emphasized excellence in our family. Both our children, well, Marcus has certainly lived up to the family name. Both children. But only one worth mentioning by name." "And your daughter?" David asked innocently. The uncomfortable pause stretched like taffy. "Sarah tries her best," my mother finally said. "She's helping with the wedding, actually. Sometimes people find their calling in service." Service. I served them millions through anonymous donations. I served them business opportunities through shell companies. I served them dignity through problems solved before they could become scandals. And now I literally served them champagne while they diminished me to strangers. The watch ticked in my clutch. Time. Grandfather had understood that revenge wasn't a sprint, but a marathon. Not a sword, but water, wearing away stone drop by drop until suddenly the mountain crumbles. Victoria appeared at my elbow, her smile sharp as winter. "The photographer wants a picture of the whole family, including you." It wasn't a request. I found myself herded to the ballroom center, positioned at the very edge of the group, half hidden behind a cousin's shoulder. The photographer, James, who'd recognized me earlier, kept staring at me with puzzled recognition. "Everyone say family," the wedding coordinator chirped. Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. As the flash went off, I felt the watch pulse against my palm. 1 more hour. In exactly 1 hour, at the father-daughter dance I wasn't invited to join, everything would change. The watch had been wound. Time was ticking. And true worth, my worth, was about to be proven in the most spectacular way possible. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "All contracts ready. The foundation announcement is loaded, waiting for your signal." I looked at my family, glowing in their ignorance, basking in success built on my invisible foundation. Then I glanced at the watch's inscription 1 more time. True worth is proven in time. Grandfather, I thought, gripping the watch like a talisman, you were right. My time is now. In exactly 1 hour, at the father-daughter dance I wasn't invited to, everything would unravel. The appearance of Harrison Whitfield, my family's estate lawyer, shouldn't have surprised me. I'd arranged it, after all. But watching him navigate the ballroom with his signature silver briefcase, while my family remained oblivious to the bomb about to detonate, felt surreal, like directing a play where I was both puppeteer and player. "Mr. Chen," Harrison announced, approaching my father with the gravitas only a 900 an hour attorney could muster. "I apologize for the intrusion, but there's been a development with the Wellington Foundation that requires immediate attention." My father's face cycled through confusion, concern, and then that practiced smile he wore when money was involved. "Of course, Harrison, what kind of development?" "The foundation has requested a formal presentation tonight. They're considering a major investment, but they want to ensure all stakeholders are present." Harrison's eyes swept the room and landed on me, holding half a second too long. "All stakeholders." I busied myself collecting empty glasses, but Victoria noticed the look. She always noticed everything. It's what made her dangerous and perfect for Marcus in equal measure. "Why would the help need to be present for a business discussion?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet poison. Harrison consulted his papers. The foundation specifically requested the entire Chen family. They're very thorough about their due diligence. "Sarah's not really involved in the family business," Marcus interjected, having materialized with his usual impeccable timing for dismissing me. "She wouldn't understand the complexities." "Nevertheless," Harrison interrupted, which cost him effort, "lawyers rarely interrupt clients who pay their mortgages." They insisted. Victoria's fingers drummed against her champagne flute. Waterford crystal, I noticed, $300 per glass. "How peculiar. Sarah, don't you find that peculiar?" I shrugged, playing the confused servant. "I just serve drinks. I don't know anything about foundations." But Victoria had moved closer, and I could smell her perfume again, mixed now with the sharp scent of suspicion. "You know what I find interesting?" She pulled out her phone, swiping to something. I did a reverse image search on that photo the photographer showed. You know what came up? My heart rate spiked, but I kept my hands steady. Probably someone who looks like me. It happens. "Shut up." The words were quiet, delivered with a smile for anyone watching. "I know you're lying. What I don't know is why." She showed me her phone screen, the Bitcoin acquisition, my photo buried in page 7 of search results, but there, proof of my other life. The caption read, "NeuralNet CEO Sarah Chen finalizes historic deal." "Fascinating resemblance," she continued. Same name, same face, same MIT graduation year. What are the odds? Coincidences happen, I said weakly. Not in my world. She leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me exactly who you are and what you're planning, or I'm going to announce to everyone here that you've been lying to your family for years. The ultimatum hung between us like a sword. Around us, the wedding continued. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses I'd paid for in a venue I owned. The irony was almost suffocating. Sarah, my mother's voice cut through the tension. The bathroom in the East Wing needs attention. The bathroom, they wanted me to clean toilets at my brother's wedding. In my own venue. Victoria smiled. Better run along, we'll continue this later. I escaped to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I locked the door behind me. The marble countertop, Carrara, imported from Italy at my specification, was cool against my palms. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be. Tired, defeated, insignificant. My phone buzzed. Multiple messages from David, my CFO. Your mother is asking about Wellington's board. I've deflected twice. How long do I maintain cover? Then from my head of security. Photographer is digging deeper. He's contacted 3 tech journalists. The walls were closing in. Victoria's suspicions, James's recognition, the lawyer's presence, all the threads I'd carefully woven were starting to tangle. One wrong move and everything would collapse before I could reveal it on my terms. I opened my compact, vintage Chanel, another small rebellion against my assigned poverty, and found the USB drive hidden in the powder compartment. Every document was loaded, the shell company contracts, the Wellington Foundation incorporation papers, the deed to the Whitmore estate, proof of everything. A knock rattled the door. Sarah, it's Helen. I let her in, and she immediately locked the door behind her. Victoria's onto you, she said without preamble. She's got Marcus running financial searches on variations of your name. They'll find neural net within the hour. How do you... I've been watching you for years, sweetheart. Did you really think I believed the outlet store story? Or that you lived in a studio apartment while wearing a different designer watch every family dinner? She'd noticed, of course she had. What are you? She asked. Really? I met her eyes in the mirror. Someone who's about to show them exactly what they threw away. Helen smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen all evening. Good. They deserve whatever you're planning. But Victoria, she's smarter than Marcus. Be careful. Another knock. Sarah. Victoria's voice, sing-song and dangerous. We need to talk, now. I looked at Helen, who squeezed my shoulder. Your time, remember? I opened the door to find Victoria flanked by my mother and Marcus, an intervention in evening wear. We know you're hiding something, my mother said, her voice tight with embarrassment. At your brother's wedding, of all places. Have you no shame? The irony almost made me laugh. They were confronting me about keeping secrets while standing in my venue, living off my money, thriving on my invisible support. We found some interesting financial records, Marcus said, holding up his phone. Someone named S. Chen has been making major tech acquisitions. Someone with your birthday. Victoria smiled triumphantly. So either you tell us the truth right now, or we call security and have you removed from the wedding. Security, my security, who worked for me. The watch in my clutch ticked louder, or maybe that was my imagination. 15 minutes until the father-daughter dance. 15 minutes until everything changed. I straightened my apron, that degrading polyester shield they'd forced me to wear, and met their eyes with 15 years of suppressed truth. "You want to know who I am?" I said quietly. "Wait 15 minutes. The Wellington Foundation has an announcement that will explain everything." Victoria stepped forward, but the wedding coordinator's voice echoed through the hallway. "Ladies and gentlemen, please gather for the father-daughter dance." My father appeared, confused by the family congregation in the hallway. "What's happening here?" "Your daughter," my mother said, the words dripping with disdain, "is apparently someone we don't know." He looked at me, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time in years. "Sarah," the watch struck 9 p.m. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ's voice boomed through the venue, "we have a special presentation from the venue owner." Victoria's face went white. Marcus grabbed my arm. My mother gasped, but it was too late. The screens throughout the ballroom flickered to life with the Wellington Foundation logo. My logo. It was time. The service elevator to the manager's office had never felt longer. 30 seconds that stretched like hours as I ascended from servant to CEO, from shadow to spotlight. My hands worked quickly in the small space, peeling off the degrading apron and revealing the Oscar de la Renta gown underneath. Black silk with strategic beading that caught light like captured stars. I'd hidden it here this morning, knowing this moment would come. The elevator opened directly into my office. Yes, my office, though none of my family knew it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ballroom below, where 300 guests stood frozen, staring at screens displaying the Wellington Foundation logo. David, my CFO, stood by the desk with a briefcase of documents and a tablet showing real-time financial feeds. "They're all waiting," he said simply. "Your family looks concerned?" Concerned was generous. Through the windows, I could see my mother clutching my father's arm, her face pale. Marcus was shouting something at the DJ, but the music had stopped. Victoria stood apart from them, her wedding dress suddenly looking like armor she didn't know how to use. "James Chen published his story 2 minutes ago," David continued, showing me his phone. "Tech CEO secretly saves family that rejected her. It's already trending." I wasn't ready for that part yet, but the dominoes were falling faster than planned. I touched grandfather's watch one more time, drawing strength from its steady ticking. "Your attorney is in position," David added. "The foundation board members, your board members, are seated at table 3, though your family hasn't noticed them yet. Table 3. I'd placed them strategically, close enough to witness, but far enough to avoid suspicion. Tech titans and venture capitalists my family had spent years trying to court, all secretly reporting to me. My phone lit up with messages. Security, photographer requesting exclusive, attorney, documents ready for presentation, property manager, venue ownership ready to display, board member, standing by for your entrance. Then a text from Marcus. "What have you done?" "Everything," I thought. "Everything you said I couldn't." I stepped into my Louboutin, not the ones from earlier, but new ones, red-soled declarations of war. My reflection in the office mirror showed someone I'd hidden for 15 years. Successful, powerful, unashamed. "Ma'am," David said, "your brother is attempting to access the sound system. Security is asking how to proceed." "Let him," I said, applying lipstick the color of old blood. "Let him try to stop what's already in motion." Through the window, I watched the wedding coordinator, my employee, though she'd only learned that tonight, approach the microphone. Her hands shook slightly as she held the cards I'd written months ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying over the confused murmur, "we have a special presentation from the owner of the Whitmore estate." "There must be a mistake," my mother's voice carried even from here. "We vetted the venue. The owner is some tech person who stays anonymous." The screens changed. My face appeared, not the servant in the apron from hours ago, but the CEO portrait from my corporate website. Beneath it, text scrolled, "Sarah Chen, founder and CEO, NeuralNet Technologies founder and CEO, Bytecoin Systems founder and CEO, Tempus Innovations founder and president, the Wellington Foundation." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, the crash of a dropped champagne flute. But the presentation continued, my pre-recorded voice filling the space. "Good evening. I apologize for the interruption to this beautiful celebration. However, there are some truths that need to be shared." I walked to the office door, my heels clicking against Italian marble I'd selected myself. Below, my family stood frozen as the presentation continued. For the past 15 years, the Wellington Foundation has provided over $50 million in support to the Chen family businesses. My father's knees buckled. Marcus caught him, his own face ash gray. Every loan, every bailout, every mysterious investor who saved you at the last minute. That was me, your daughter, your sister. The one you insisted on serving drinks tonight. Victoria's bouquet fell from her hands, white roses scattering across the dance floor like surrender flags. The presentation showed documents, loan agreements, bank transfers, property deeds, each one stamped with the Wellington seal, signed with my name. But perhaps the most interesting revelation, my recorded voice continued, is that this venue, the Whitmore Estate, where you chose to celebrate, has been owned by me for 3 years. The screens showed the property deed, then security footage from tonight. My mother demanding I work the kitchen, Marcus calling me a failure, Victoria forcing me to clean. Each humiliation captured by my own cameras in my own venue. So tonight, as I served you champagne in the venue I own, paid for by companies I built, while wearing an apron you demanded I put on, I realized something. I stepped out of the office, onto the mezzanine balcony overlooking the ballroom, every head turned upward. It's time to stop hiding. The presentation ended, leaving only silence. 300 guests stared at me, the servant transformed, the failure revealed as savior, the ghost made flesh. Marcus found his voice first. "This is a joke. This has to be a joke." I descended the curved staircase, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a path to my family. "No joke," I said, my voice carrying without a microphone. "Just 15 years of truth you refuse to see." My mother stepped forward, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine, seeking the right combination. "Sarah, darling, don't." The word cracked like a whip. You don't get to darling me now. I reached the dance floor, standing in the spot where servants belonged, where they'd placed me. But now everyone knew who really owned the ground beneath our feet. "Mr. Harrison," I called to the lawyer, "please distribute the documents." He opened his briefcase, pulling out stack after stack of papers, contracts, deeds, financial statements, the paper trail of my secret empire. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, snatching a document. "Your company's debt," I replied calmly, "which I purchased this afternoon. Congratulations, brother. I'm your biggest creditor." His hands shook as he read. the legal language spelling out what he'd always feared. His little sister owned him. And Victoria, I continued, turning to my new sister-in-law, that prenuptial agreement you signed, the one Marcus insisted on? Check clause 47B. She grabbed the papers, her wedding manicure scratching across the pages. Her face went white as she found it. In the event of financial fraud or misrepresentation of assets. You see, I said, addressing the room, but looking at my family, Marcus has been claiming my work as his for 15 years. My algorithms, my code, my innovations, that's fraud, which means that prenup is about to become very interesting. The room held its breath. The Wellington Foundation board members stood as planned, their presence lending weight to my words. But I'm not here for revenge, I said, pulling out grandfather's watch. I'm here for something much more valuable. The watch caught the light, its gold face reflecting the chandeliers above. I'm here for the truth. As I stood in the center of the dance floor, in the venue I owned, surrounded by the family I'd saved, wearing designer shoes instead of servant's shame, I realized something. The reversal was complete. The servant had become the queen, but this was only the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, clearly reading from a card someone had handed him. We have a special presentation from the venue owner. The ballroom screens flickered back to life, and this time it wasn't a presentation. It was live footage from the office upstairs, where the entire board of the Wellington Foundation had assembled. Tech titans my family had spent years trying to reach. Linda Zhao from Sequoia Capital, Robert Kim from Google Ventures, Michael Torres from Apple's Innovation Lab. All of them my board members. Sarah, Linda's voice rang through the speakers. We're ready when you are. I stood in the center of the dance floor, grandfather's watch heavy in my hand. My family formed a broken constellation around me, Marcus gripping the debt documents, Victoria clutching her prenup, my parents standing like statues carved from disbelief. 15 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Marcus Chen submitted a thesis to Harvard Business School, a brilliant piece on neural network applications in financial markets. It won him the Exeter Prize, launched his career, and became the foundation of his success. Marcus's face was marble white. Sarah, don't. The only problem, I continued, was that it wasn't his work. It was mine. I pressed a button on my phone. The screens displayed side-by-side comparisons. My original code repositories, dated 3 months before his thesis, and his revolutionary paper. Line for line, concept for concept, identical. Every innovation Marcus has claimed, every algorithm he's marketed, every prediction model that made him rich, it all originated here. I tapped my temple. In the mind of the sister he called a failure. You can't prove that, Marcus stammered, but his voice cracked like thin ice. Actually, I can. I nodded to David, who pulled out a laptop. You see, Marcus, when you copied my work, you also copied my digital signature, a hidden watermark I embedded in every algorithm, like a painter signing their work, except invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. The screens lit up with code, highlighting the signatures. My name encoded in the very mathematics Marcus had built his empire on. This is ridiculous, my mother's voice sliced through the murmurs. Sarah, how dare you try to ruin your brother's wedding with these lies? Lies. I turned to her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her flinch. Like the lie that I failed, Like the lie that Marcus saved the family business, or the biggest lie, that I was worthless? I pulled out a folder from David's briefcase, throwing documents onto the nearest table. They scattered like accusations. Every crisis you've faced, I solved. Dad's bankruptcy in 2018. I bought the debt through a shell company and forgave it. The lawsuit that almost destroyed the family name, I settled it anonymously. Marcus's first major client at Goldman, that was my company, hiring him to save his career. My father reached for the papers with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the irrefutable proof. The house you live in? I continued, momentum building. I paid off the mortgage when you defaulted, the medical bills when Dad had his heart attack, covered. The donation that got Marcus into Harvard in the first place? That was my money, earned from my first startup, the one you called a silly computer project. Stop! The word came from Victoria, surprisingly. She stood straight despite her world crumbling, designer dress impeccable, even in defeat. Just stop, we get it. You're rich, you're successful, you won. What do you want? An apology, tears, us to beg? I looked at her, this woman who'd married my brother for money that was secretly mine, who'd humiliated me hours ago, who'd tried to expose me before I was ready. No, I said simply, I want freedom. I turned to the board members on the screen. Linda, please proceed with the announcement. Linda nodded, her expression professionally neutral. The Wellington Foundation hereby announces a complete restructuring of its charitable giving. Effective immediately, all support to Chen Family Enterprises will cease. My mother gasped. Marcus dropped the papers he was holding. Furthermore, Linda continued, all outstanding loans will be transferred to standard commercial terms. No more forgiveness, no more extensions. No more anonymous bailouts. You're destroying us, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Without that support. You'll survive, I interrupted. Or you won't, but either way, it will be on your own merits, not mine. I walked to the head table where the wedding cake stood, 7 tiers of fondant perfection I'd paid for. You see, I'm not destroying you. I'm setting us all free. You from the illusion of your success. Me from the shadows I've lived in. Sarah, please. My father's voice broke. We're family. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Family, I repeated, turning back to face them. Family doesn't shove each other into kitchens. Family doesn't steal each other's work. Family doesn't erase each other from photos. From celebrations, from existence. I pulled out the family photo from Marcus's engagement party, the one where I'd been cropped out, my shoulder barely visible at the edge. But you're right, I continued, we are family, which is why I'm not taking everything I could. Marcus, you still have your job. You'll just have to succeed without my algorithms. Dad, the house is yours. But the payments are your responsibility. Mom, your charity committees will survive, but without my anonymous donations propping them up. And me? Victoria asked, her voice steady despite everything. I looked at my new sister-in-law with something approaching respect. You're smart, Victoria, smarter than Marcus in many ways. That prenup you're holding, it's worth exactly what Marcus actually earned himself. Do the math. Her eyes widened as she understood. Without my contributions, Marcus's assets were a fraction of what she'd thought. But here's the thing, I added, pulling out one final document. I'm also announcing a new initiative, the Chen Family Foundation, separate from Wellington with Aunt Helen as director. It will support animal welfare, education, and families torn apart by their own prejudices. Consider it my wedding gift." Helen stepped forward from the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah," I handed her the founding documents. 50 million endowment to start. Because you're the only one who ever saw me, really saw me." The room exploded in whispers, camera phones capturing everything. The society wedding of the year had become something else entirely. A revelation, a reversal, a revolution. Marcus stepped forward, and for a moment I saw my big brother again. Not the golden child or the thief, but the boy who'd once taught me to ride a bike. "Sarah," he said quietly, so only I could hear. I'm sorry. I knew what I was doing was wrong. Every time I presented your work, every time I took credit, I knew. But I was so scared that my little sister was smarter, better, more deserving. I turned that fear into cruelty. The admission hung between us, 15 years overdue. "I know," I replied. "I've always known, but knowing and forgiving are different things." I moved toward the exit, the crowd parting once again. At the doorway, I turned back one last time. "The reception can continue," I announced. "Everything's paid for, by me naturally. Enjoy the champagne, enjoy the venue, enjoy this last night where my money funds your illusions." My phone buzzed with a text from James Chen, the photographer. "This is the story of the decade. Exclusive interview?" I typed back. "Tomorrow, tonight, I'm finally free." As I reached the door, Marcus called out, "Sarah, what about us? What about family?" I stopped, my hand on the door handle, grandfather's watch ticking against my wrist. The valet pulled up in my Tesla, not the anonymous sedan I'd arrived in, but my actual car, the one with Neural 1 on the plates. As I stood at the venue entrance, the November air bit through my designer gown, but I didn't feel cold. For the first time in 15 years, I felt nothing but clean, crystalline clarity. "Sarah, wait!" Marcus's voice behind me, broken and smaller than I'd ever heard it. He'd followed me out, his tuxedo jacket abandoned, bow tie hanging loose, like a surrender flag. "What could you possibly want to say?" I asked, not turning around. "The truth," he said. "Finally the truth." I faced him then, this brother who'd been my hero before he became my thief. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see the reception in chaos. Some guests leaving, others gathering in clusters of gossip. My parents sitting at their table, like rulers deposed. "I've been in therapy," Marcus said quietly. "For 2 years. Victoria doesn't know. Nobody knows. But I've been trying to understand why I hurt you, why I couldn't stand your success." The confession surprised me. Marcus seeking help was like a wolf admitting it needed to learn not to hunt. "And," I prompted. "And I realized it started when we were kids. You were 7, I was 10. You solved that puzzle Dad brought home. The one from his office that none of his engineers could figure out. You just looked at it and knew. And Dad laughed and ruffled your hair and said, 'My little genius.' It was the first time he'd ever looked at either of us with real pride. I remembered that puzzle, a mechanical thing with interlocking pieces that formed a sphere. I'd seen the pattern immediately, the way some people see music in mathematics. After that, Marcus continued, everything you touched turned to gold. Your science projects, your grades, your ideas. And me? I was just ordinary. The eldest son who was supposed to be exceptional but wasn't. So I learned to take what you created and present it better. You were the genius, but I was the salesman. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that made it mine. It didn't, I said flatly. I know, God, I know. Every night for 15 years, I've gone to bed knowing my entire career was built on your foundation. Do you know what that does to a person? To know you're a fraud every second of every day? Do you know what it does? I countered. To watch someone you loved steal your life's work? To be erased from your own family? To serve champagne at your thief's wedding? He flinched. I know I can't undo it, but Sarah, destroying me won't heal you. I'm not destroying you, I said, echoing my words from inside. I'm giving you the gift of authenticity. For the first time in your adult life, Marcus, you get to find out who you really are. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her wedding dress gathered in her hands, mascara streaking her cheeks in designer devastation. Marcus, the guests are leaving. Your parents are. They're broken. She looked at me with those calculating eyes, but something had changed. You played the long game perfectly, she said, with what sounded like admiration. 15 years of patience, I would have broken after 2. You married him for money that was mine, I pointed out. Yes, she admitted without shame. But I think I also married him because I recognized something in him, that hollow place where integrity should be. I have it too. Maybe that's why we deserved each other. She pulled off her wedding ring, a 5-carat diamond I'd indirectly paid for, and handed it to Marcus. The marriage is over, not because of the money. I could handle being poor, but I can't handle being married to someone who could do what you did to her. If you could steal from your own sister, what would you do to me? Marcus took the ring, his hand shaking. Victoria, please. No, she said firmly. Sarah's revenge isn't destroying your career, Marcus. It's revealing who you really are. And now I see it too. She walked past us to her own car, a Bentley that would probably be repossessed within the month, and drove away without looking back. Marcus stood there, a broken king in a rental tuxedo, holding a ring that represented a marriage that lasted exactly 4 hours. What do I do now? He asked, and for the first time since we were children, he was asking me for help. You start over, I said. You take that Harvard education, the one my money paid for, and you build something real, something yours. It will be smaller, harder, and less impressive than what you had, but it will be authentic. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about grandfather's watch, about time and patience and the long arc of justice. Maybe, I said, in time. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration. We can't go back to being siblings who trust each other. That bridge didn't burn. You demolished it brick by brick over 15 years. A limousine pulled up, and my parents emerged, aged a decade in an hour. My mother's perfect composure had cracked like an egg, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. Sarah, she began, reaching for me. I stepped back. No touching, no sudden familiarity. You don't get to embrace me now that you know I'm worth embracing. We're your parents, my father said weakly. Biologically, yes, but parents see their children. You saw only what you wanted to see. Marcus's potential and my failure. Even when evidence suggested otherwise, you clung to that narrative because it was comfortable. We were wrong, my mother admitted, the words seemingly dragged from her throat. We were blind and cruel and wrong. Yes, I agreed. You were. So what now? She asked. Do we lose you forever? Do you disappear from our lives entirely? I considered this. The nuclear option was tempting. Complete severance, total disconnection. but I thought of grandfather, of his patience, of the long game he'd taught me to play. Now you learn to see me, I said, really see me. Not the failure you imagined or the savior I became, but the actual person. That will take time, years probably, and I make no promises about the outcome. But there's a chance? My father's voice held a pathetic hope. There's a chance you can earn the right to know me, I corrected. But it starts with accepting that the daughter you thought you had never existed. The real Sarah Chen has been invisible to you for 15 years. Maybe it's time you met her. Helen appeared then, the foundation documents clutched to her chest, tears still streaking her face. Sarah, this is too much. 50 million. It's exactly right, I interrupted. You saw me when no one else did. You kept my secrets when you figured them out. You loved me when I was unlovable. That's worth more than 50 million, but it's a start. She pulled me into a hug, and I let her, the only family embrace I'd accept tonight. Grandfather would be so proud, she whispered. You became everything he knew you could be. As I pulled away, I saw the wedding coordinator approaching with an iPad. Ms. Chen, there's the matter of the reception. The guests are asking. Let them stay, I decided. The food and wine are paid for, but have the screens display the full story. Every donation, every bailout, every secret save. Let society know exactly who Sarah Chen is and what she's done. Consider it my coming out party. The coordinator nodded and retreated. I looked at my family, broken, revealed, finally honest. I'm leaving now. You can stay for the reception or go. But know this, the Sarah who served you in shadows is dead. The Sarah who stands before you owes you nothing. Not money, not forgiveness, not even acknowledgement. If you want any relationship with me going forward, you'll have to earn it. How? Marcus asked desperately. Start by being honest about tonight, I said, moving toward my car. Tell everyone the truth, that you built your career on your sister's work, that your family fortune came from the daughter you discarded, that the only reason you're not bankrupt is because the failure in the family was actually your salvation. That will ruin us socially, my mother protested. Then be ruined, I said simply. Be ruined and rebuild as something real, or maintain your facade and lose any chance of knowing me again. I got into my Tesla, the leather seats a cocoon of earned luxury. As I started the engine, Marcus called out one more time. Sarah, the watch, grandfather's watch. You should know. He left me a letter. He said to give it to you when you were ready to shine. I never did. It's in my apartment in the safe. The combination is your birthday. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Even grandfather's last message had been kept from me. Bring it to Helen's shelter tomorrow, I said through the window. We'll see if I'm ready to read it. As I drove away from the Whitmore estate, from my family's destruction and potential rebirth, from 15 years of shadows, I felt the watch ticking against my wrist. Time. It had taken time, but I'd finally proved my worth, not to them, but to myself. As I stood in the doorway, I pulled out grandfather's watch one last time. 3 months later, I stood in the same ballroom of the Whitmore estate, but everything had changed. The space was transformed with soft lighting and tech displays, celebrating something real this time. Neural Net's IPO, the public offering that would value my primary company at $3 billion. The guest list was mine, engineers who'd believed in my vision, investors who'd backed me when I was nobody, the few friends who knew my real story. Helen stood by the chocolate fountain, dark Belgian chocolate, not champagne, directing her therapy dogs as they provided comfort to the children from her shelter I'd invited. "The Journal wants a quote," David said, appearing at my elbow with an iPad, "about the family situation." The family situation. 3 months since Marcus's wedding imploded, and the tech world still couldn't stop talking about it. The secret CEO, the stolen algorithms, the 15-year revenge, served cold with champagne. "Tell them I'm focused on the future, not the past," I said, though my hand unconsciously went to grandfather's watch. I'd read his letter the day after the wedding. Marcus had brought it to Helen's shelter as requested, his hands shaking as he handed over the yellowed envelope. "My brilliant granddaughter," it had begun. "If you're reading this, you've finally stopped hiding your light. I knew from the moment you solved that sphere puzzle that you were extraordinary. But I also knew your family would try to dim your shine, to make themselves feel brighter. So I'm leaving you the only thing of value I have, time. The watch is yours, as is this advice. Revenge served immediately is violence, but revenge served after proper aging is justice. Be patient, build in shadows, then, when they least expect it, step into the light and blind them with your brilliance. Your parents will call you cruel for revealing the truth. Marcus will call you vindictive, but I call you brave. It takes courage to stop enabling those who diminish you. It takes strength to demand recognition for your worth. Shine, my dear one. Shine so bright they can never ignore you again." Grandfather now standing in my ballroom at my celebration, I understood what he meant. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, mine. "Sarah?" I turned to find Marcus in the doorway. Wearing a simple suit from Target, not Armani. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt but somehow more honest. Behind him stood our parents, aged and humbled, dressed in clothes that weren't designer for the first time I could remember. "Security cleared us," he said quickly, "but we'll leave if you want." I studied them, this family that had broken and rebuilt itself in 3 months. Marcus had publicly admitted to stealing my work, destroying his reputation, but gaining something like integrity. My parents had sold their mansion to pay debts without my support, moving into a modest apartment. They'd all started therapy, separately and together. "Why are you here?" I asked. "To witness your moment," my mother said softly. "The one we should have celebrated 15 years ago." "And to give you this," Marcus added, pulling out a small wrapped box. Inside was a digital photo frame, cycling through images I'd never seen. Me at age 7 with the sphere puzzle. Me at science fairs they'd never attended. My MIT graduation they'd missed. Pictures they'd taken but never displayed. Hidden in boxes while Marcus's achievements lined the walls. "We're making a new family photo wall," my father explained. "You're at the center." "Bit late for that," I observed. "Yes," they agreed in unison. "We're not asking for forgiveness," Marcus said, "or money, or even a relationship. We just wanted you to know that we finally see you, the real you, and she's magnificent." I looked at the photos cycling past, evidence that they'd seen me all along, but chosen to look away. It should have made me angry, but I felt only a sort of distant sadness for the family we could have been. "Stay for the party," I said finally, "but don't expect special treatment. You're guests, nothing more." They nodded and melted into the crowd, maintaining respectful distance. I watched my mother approach Helen, probably to apologize, for years of dismissing her. My father stood alone, nursing a soda water, no longer the patriarch, but just another face in the crowd. Marcus found a corner and stayed there, watching me with something like pride mixed with profound regret. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda Zhao called from the stage, "please welcome the CEO of Neural Net Technologies, the woman who revolutionized predictive modeling while everyone thought she was serving coffee, Sarah Chen." The applause was thunderous and genuine. I took the stage, looking out at faces that saw me for exactly who I was. 15 years ago, I began. I built my first company in secret because my family was ashamed of my ambitions. Tonight, NeuralNet goes public, valued at $3 billion. But the real value isn't in the numbers. I pulled out grandfather's watch, letting it catch the light. The real value is in time. Time to grow in shadows when the light isn't safe. Time to build foundations while others build facades. Time to prove that worth isn't determined by others' recognition, but by our own persistence. I looked directly at my family, clustered near the back. Some of you know my story, how I was shoved into a kitchen at my brother's wedding, in this very venue, forced to serve while my achievements were erased. But kitchens are where transformation happens, where raw becomes refined, where heat creates strength, where the best meals and the best revenges are prepared. Laughter rippled through the crowd, appreciative and understanding. "They shoved me in the kitchen at my brother's wedding," I continued. "But they didn't expect that I already owned the whole restaurant. They didn't expect that every dollar they celebrated came from the daughter they dismissed. They didn't expect that their failure of a sister was actually their secret salvation." I paused, letting the words settle. But most importantly, they didn't expect that revealing the truth wouldn't destroy them. It would free us all. I looked at Marcus, who was crying openly now, no longer concerned with appearances. "So here's to transformation," I raised my glass of sparkling cider. "To kitchens and shadows and the long game. To families that can break and potentially rebuild. To worth that doesn't need external validation. And to time, the ultimate revealer of truth." The room erupted in applause. As I stepped down from the stage, James Chen appeared with his camera. "One photo?" he asked. "For the follow-up story?" I nodded, but then did something unexpected. "Marcus, Mom, Dad," I called out, "come here." They approached tentatively, uncertain. "A family photo," I told James, "an honest one." We arranged ourselves awkwardly. No practiced poses, no fake smiles. Just 4 people who shared DNA and a complicated history, standing together in a ballroom where everything had changed. As the flash went off, I felt grandfather's watch tick against my wrist. Time. It had taken time, but we were all finally where we belonged. Not together necessarily, but truthful. Not healed, but healing. Not a family, but people who might, someday, become one again. The party continued around us, my triumph, my vindication, my emergence from shadows. But I found myself in the kitchen one more time, this time by choice, laughing with the catering staff, who had no idea they'd been my unwitting accomplices 3 months ago. To kitchens, I toasted them with champagne I could openly afford, where all the best transformations begin. As the night wound down, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, grandfather's watch warm in my hand. The inscription caught the moonlight. "True worth is proven in time." "You were right, grandfather," I whispered to the stars. "It just took me 15 years to prove it." Helen joined me, slipping her arm through mine. So what now? You've built an empire, exposed the truth, started healing. What's next? I smiled, thinking of all the invisible daughters, sisters, and wives out there, serving in shadows while others claimed their light. Now, I said, winding the watch 3 times, like grandfather taught me. Now I help others step out of their kitchens and into their boardrooms. The Wellington Foundation is about to get a new mission. Revenge philanthropy? Helen asked with a knowing smile. Justice philanthropy, I corrected, for everyone who's been shoved into kitchens they secretly own. The watch ticked steadily, marking time that was finally, truly, completely mine. They shoved me in the kitchen at my brother's wedding. They didn't expect that kitchens are where transformations begin, where raw becomes refined, where heat creates strength. They didn't expect that I'd already bought the whole restaurant, and they certainly didn't expect that their story would inspire thousands of others to stop serving in shadows and start shining in their own light. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or shoved into your own metaphorical kitchen, find more tales of elegant justice and refined revenge on our channel. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's revelation.